So you started a podcast. Now what? Well, if you're smart, you'll get a website, and that opens up potential SEO traffic opportunities. So I always say treat your podcast, regardless if you started out, you're brand new, you're into it in a while, or you want to start. Treat it like a business, regardless if it's not going to be, if it's a passion project or a hobby. You really want to build the biggest audience that gets the most value out of your content. And in that doing so, you need a website. So, website, best mousetrap on the internet. You get people to a place where you control that traffic. So, if you leave them on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and nothing happened, you can't really follow up or add more value. You can't have them subscribe to your newsletter or email list. You can't add additional content value to them in one significant location. So, with the website, you control the destiny of your podcast. With that, it looks like a daunting task. If you're familiar with WordPress, it's one of the biggest builders in terms of the amount of websites that are in WordPress. So if you do know WordPress, you can potentially build it in WordPress, or if you don't, have somebody do so. There's a lot of podcast formatted themes already that you can purchase and then obviously customize to your liking, or you can bootstrap it and build it from scratch. But then if you have no time or don't want to go the WordPress route or any other dedicated builder, you can use something like services provided solely for podcasters and podcasts. Services like Podpage, where in a few minutes you can create a website, no code required, basically syncing your RSS feed with that. Individual pages created for each episode. And then you have additional opportunities to enhance that website, like activating a blog, adding supplemental content that way, adding video, and a lot of other components. Now, website. It looks like a daunting task, but once you're done, you own it, you control it, you can do whatever you want with it. Something like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, any other social media platform, or a paid search effort or paid social effort. So if something is done wrong on your behalf, or you do it, sometimes you can get an account banned in terms of paid. Sometimes you get an account banned or somebody hacks your account in terms of social. Then you lose that community, you lose that hard-earned built up subscribers or followers or connections. So what do you do with that? You drive them, you convince them, you tell them to come to your website, sign up for your newsletter, for your additional assets that you have provided for a potential listener, for an email list, whatever you want. But basically, if you get them to the website, you control that traffic, you control that action, and no one's going to take that away from you. You're hosting a dedicated website, you own the domain. Nobody's going to say, hey, give me that, unless you're, breaking some kind of copyright issues. So with that, okay, website. So best practices. With the website comes the opportunity for organic traffic in terms of search engine optimization. So in that, it's kind of a threefold, three-pronged approach. So you have your technical aspects of search engine optimization, also known as SEO, how the site is built, the crawlability of the site, how fast it loads, how clunky the code is, how clean it is, things of that nature. Then you have your on-site, obviously all the content, all the metadata in terms of meta titles, meta description, internal linking, things of that nature. So the things that you see when you land on the site, and some that you may not. And then you have your off-site, which is building up your link profile, your backlink profile, and basically it's the links, or the websites that link to you across the web, basically clarifying and qualifying you in a way like a upvote. So hey, this website is legitimate if the link is coming from a related community or a reputable source within your industry. Now, links aren't the end all be all, but they are a component in terms of your overall SEO strategy. So you have those components. So the way the site is built and things of that nature, if you're building it, you can control it. If you're using a website builder or a service that's more templated, you don't necessarily have control of it, but you can still do things in terms of best practice and make sure that nothing is being done that can negatively influence your website. So for on-site, the content strategy, okay, you have a dedicated website, you have an individual page potentially for each episode. Now what? So now you enhance the experience of a potential person that lands on your website. For that, you need to do additional keyword research, additional topical research, look at trends data in terms of over time, and really utilize tools like SEMrush, also known as SEMrush, to see what potential competitors are doing. I wouldn't call it a competitors in terms of your podcast, but podcasts that maybe you aspire to be in terms of the community that they've built or the size of the site or the size of the podcast and their website or the popularity and engagement as well. So you can look at what they're doing, kind of competitive analysis, or if there's something you want to build subject matter around an episode. So I would recommend starting a blog and having a follow-up blog after each episode, kind of elaborating and building off and adding additional value like takeaways or additional information about the topic or about the guest if you have an interview-based show of your interview. So in that, you use tools like I suggested, SEMrush. Uber suggests you can, in terms of social and what's trending and what's going viral, you can look at and use BuzzSumo. You can get ideas for uh, topics and titles and descriptions that work or that people are actually clicking through on. But in that, so if you have a topic like motivation, you can just type motivation and SEMrush, and it'll give you a list of related terms to motivation. And in that case, it would be a few thousand terms. You look at it spits out the monthly search volume globally, the difficulty, the amount of pages indexed related to that subject. And if you're a brand new site or in general, you kind of want to find a sweet spot of what you're actually incorporating. In that, I mean terms or topics that have a good amount of search volume and a low amount of difficulty. So there's less competition and more ability and the chance to show up on the first page because that is quite hard to do if you're starting out from day one. So you're doing additional things in that. If you have a content strategy at this point, you built it, you're adding great content, you're getting people are actually staying on your website. So you're looking at driving down the click-through rate, meaning how many people land on the specific page. And then in terms of that situation, then looking at bounce rate. So, do they go further than the page that they landed? And if they leave the site, that obviously adds to the bounce rate. The bounce rate, the higher the bounce rate, the more people aren't really engaging and leaving after kind of the first landing. You want a lower bounce rate, and in that, you actually add value in terms of SEO because bounce rate is kind of taken as a factor because if you do rank for something and somebody lands on your website and the bounce rate is high, you're giving Google or other search engines the idea that okay, it's showing up, but it's not adding value or has nothing to do with the subject matter that the person is looking for. And then in turn, you will then drop in search engine rankings because of that, because Google and other search engines wants to give the most relevant information that adds the most value to a potential searcher. Now, for offsite, you're building a backlink profile. Now, don't build it in terms of being spammy, buying link. Well, there's some links that you can buy that you can only buy. So, like business directories like Inc. or business.com. So, they provide a business directory and you can create it or purchase it and link back to your podcast if you have a LLC for your podcast or your podcast is part of a business. But you can also do it in terms of a natural way. People actually spam it out. Sometimes you get emails saying, hey, I can buy all these backlinks. Now, that's not an organic way because you want links that are credible and also add that SEO value, that basically pointing to your site and giving it a upvote per se, but also potential for referral traffic. So you create a link, and if it's not removed, if it's communities related to your subject matter of your a podcast, over time people can find it and keep going for it because it's related to it. So in that, I recommend, if you are a host, I would recommend going and pretty much spreading the word about your show, what you do, what you have to offer to other shows. And in that sense, most shows will include a link to a designated website in the show notes. So with that, you can, kindly ask that show to link to your podcast. And over time, if that show is related to your show, that audience can convert and cross pollinate as well. Now, the other thing, if you have an interview based show, every time you have a guest, you can send them kind of a media kit after launch, a go live kit with information, and then provide that information saying, hey, here's the link to your episode page if you want to link to it within the appearances page of your site. And in that, every time a guest adds it, it provides a backlink. So a referral domain pointing to your website. And then initially, every time somebody lands on that guest site and wants to find out more about the interview, they have a way of getting to it. So you have, referral traffic, added value, as well as SEO value. So in that kind of takeaways, the three aspects you want to consider in terms of SEO, or if you're building a website, if it's technically sound, if the content is on point and it's adding value, the user experience is great. It's more so than just, hey, getting the same information or just listening to the show. It's really adding additional information. It's really communicating with that community, adding bonuses and anything else that they can get, as well as your backlink profile, which is valuable for driving and building your domain authority over time.